Story 1. When I lost my father, a customer said it doesn't get better, it just gets different. That hit just the right spot to start healing. Story 2. A friend texted me, "You don't need to fix the whole year, just fix the next hour." It helped me get out of bed. Story 3. You do not have to forgive to move on. Sometimes you just outgrow the anger. Story 4. Years after my medical error, the physician who had cared for me immediately afterward said, "What happened to you changed the way I practice medicine." Story 5. My therapist said, "You don't have to prove your pain for it to be real." I stopped defending myself after that. Story 6. You're not ugly. You're just not your own type. I had a lot of insecurity about my looks when I was younger, and that way of thinking helped me feel less insecure. Story 7. We were waiting backstage, all lined up for graduation, our names waiting to be called. My 10th grade English teacher held my shoulder, as she had for everyone in front. When my name was called, she released my shoulder to signal my turn, patted me a couple of times, and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Nobody liked this teacher. Some students called her the bitch, but she was my favorite teacher. Once she told another teacher that I was her favorite student when I passed her class during lunch. She called me in and said, "You see this one? She's my favorite student." She said I actually gave effort. As an Asian American who still translates for her parents, I do not know the Cantonese word for proud. I had never heard this word before. But on that day at my high school graduation, my English teacher told me she was proud of me, and I sat on stage sobbing. Story 8. Just because someone else has a broken leg does not mean your sprained ankle stops hurting. It lanced the boil of the idea that my issues were not important enough to require attention and that I should stop whining, which is what I had been raised to believe. There has been a domino effect, including the recognition that some of my issues were actually quite significant once I gave myself permission to address them. Story 9. You did your best with what you knew then. Now you know more, so you will do better. Story 10. Someone said, "You were never too much. They just didn't have enough room." I cried. Story 11. You should disappoint everyone else before you disappoint yourself. As a chronic people pleaser who always puts others first, I live by this now. Story 12. I really like your nose. A friend said this to me, and it's such a small thing, but it legitimately made me cry. I had been told many times how ugly it was and that I would need surgery to fix my face. I started hating myself a little less after that. Story 13. You didn't deserve that, even if you understood why it happened. Story 14. In my late 20s, my uncle said, "You really did have a tough childhood. Your parents are crazy." I had never considered that there might be a reason I was struggling. Story 15. You are allowed to be proud of surviving something no one saw you go through. Story 16. I had been waiting in line to finalize my truck driver's license after passing my test. It was really busy, but my ticket was called and I completed some paperwork with the clerk. I had to fill out one more form, so I said, "It's pretty busy in here. I'll go sit down, fill it out, and grab another ticket so I don't waste anyone's time." The clerk said, "No, it's okay. Just fill it out here. Your time is just as good as anyone else's." I'd never heard that before, and it shifted my perspective on my own self-worth. I also have far more patience for others now. Story 17. You cannot reason with unreasonable people. If someone is committed to being unreasonable, there is no point in trying to change their minds. Story 18. You are more beautiful than you will ever know, and it has nothing to do with the way you look. Story 19. I believe it was a Reddit story or comment. The original poster was in therapy and felt flustered. The therapist asked what was the most recent thing that caused anxiety or seemed like too much. The original poster said the dishwasher did not clean the dishes properly. The therapist said, "Run it twice." I do not know why, but that advice has stuck with me. Story 20. I was heavily into heroin a bit over a decade ago. One night, I randomly read Robert Downey Jr.'s Wikipedia page and saw a quote that said something like, "It is not difficult to overcome these seemingly ghastly problems. What is hard is to decide to actually do it." Felt like a switch flipped in my head. I realized the battle was not with the drug but with myself. I wanted so badly to quit heroin. When I refocused my energy into making that decision and following through instead of only wanting to, I was able to do it. This December I will celebrate another clean anniversary, and if it had not been for that quote I read by chance, I do not think I would have made it. Story 21. An older coworker once told me, "People who disappointed you also taught you boundaries." That flipped something in me. Story 22. I spent my whole life trying to prove myself to people after I was born disabled. My wife was the first person to tell me I did not need to do anything to have value as a person. I cried in her lap. Story 23. You will be happy again. I promise you. These words were said to me by a fellow young widow right after my husband died. It had been 7 years since her loss. She was so right. I am immensely happy now, sometimes even happier than I was before, and I never thought that could be possible. Story 24. Do not look in someone else's bowl unless it is to make sure they have enough. We use this at home with our 2 young children. When one of them complains that something good happened to someone else and it is not fair, my husband or I remind them and the child finishes the phrase. It helps me keep things in perspective. Story 25. You can care about people and still choose yourself. That's not selfish, it's responsible. Story 26. It was a song. He sang, "Both of us grew up without a present father. The difference between you and me is that you still think he is going to be there." That song actually helped me move on. After I pulled myself away, my dad has tried harder to be part of my life than ever, and I no longer care. It means nothing to me. Story 27. I heard that you can do everything right and be the best person, but some people will still not like you, and that is okay. Story 28. It's just a question. A coworker once told me this when I was too afraid to ask. Now I apply it to other situations. I stop adding so much emotional depth to things, especially when I am writing a text or an email. Story 29. Thank you for taking care of your siblings when I could not. Story 30. I don't mind it when you autistic flap. It's rather cute. A girl I am seeing said this when I got excited over the little Lego Master Sword. I was horribly bullied by my family and peers for enjoying things as a child, so having someone let me be authentically myself without having to mask as a neurodivergent man feels very nice and safe. Story 31. You're still worthy even when you're boring, tired, or not improving. Story 32. There is nothing wrong with you. Don't let them steal your kindness. Story 33. My son was diagnosed with autism, and it hit me hard to think an emotional connection might be different. After I was down, I had a chat with my boss, someone who always knew the right thing to say. He asked, "Joey, did that diagnosis change him, or just your perspective of him?" At that moment, I knew the child I loved was still the same beautiful boy. The world would be okay for him, and I would be a great father to a wonderful child who is now a warm, loving, and caring young man. Story 34. You were put on this earth to do more than pay bills and lose weight. Story 35. Choosing whether to stay or leave is your decision. I will support you whatever you choose. My mother said this when I was 11 and struggling with whether to continue going to my father's house because he had been secretly abusive toward me. Story 36. My emotions are my own, and I have every right to feel them. Story 37. My adult son recently told me that he had never felt as though I failed him as a parent when I expressed regret for some of my parenting decisions. That hit me hard. Being told I had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder at age 45 helped me stop hating myself so much. Story 38. A friend of mine told me something her therapist said that I found really helpful. You do not need any diagnosis to deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Story 39. You matter. I told my therapist that my world made sense because I did not matter, and that explained all the bad things that happened. When she told me you matter, it shattered my entire viewpoint. I had to admit to myself that the things that happened should not have happened and that I did not deserve them. It was okay to be angry and hurt. This is what I remind myself of on my darkest days. Story 40. Does fiction count? If yes, then consider this line from Waiting for Godot. We wait until we can get up. Then we go on. Story 41. Every time I spilled something, my father would yell at me. One time my 2-year-old niece spilled juice on the table and I snapped at her. But she looked at me and said, "That's no problem, Auntie." I realized there really is no problem. Story 42. After saying, "I wish" as a habit, a friend told me, "You are going to wish your life away." It hit me. So many would have, could have, should have remarks came out of me regularly. It had never occurred to me how much of my life I was wasting wishing things were different. It now occasionally stops me from obsessing over the past. Story 43. He said there are some people in this world who get everything served on a silver platter. Then there are people like you who have to fight every single day for what you have, and you are still not giving up. He said he admires that. He does not know how you have achieved all you have despite all the struggles. It was amazing to feel seen, especially by someone I did not know well. Story 44. There's only one you. Be yourself and let the world adjust to who you are. Story 45. You are an adult. You have the right to choose the life you want regardless of what your parents think. Story 46. Spoil the little girl inside you. Look in the mirror and tell her how much you love her. Story 47. I would hesitate to diagnose you with a mental illness because the circumstances of your life explain your symptoms. Story 48. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Story 49. Sobriety delivers what alcohol promises. Read on Reddit. Stop drinking. Powerful quote. Story 50. When your son grows up, he won't take care of himself the way you take care of him now. Instead, he'll take care of himself the way you take care of yourself. Fuck. That same day I started eating healthier, doing strength training and cardio, losing weight, and scheduling a bunch of doctor's appointments to address the myriad of problems in my body that I had ignored for years. So far, I have likely prevented a stroke, lost 12 kilograms, and fixed my cholesterol and back problems. Thanks to the little one. Story 51. Nothing you do will matter in the grand scheme of things. Do the things that matter to you. Story 52. You might view me as cynical. My mother said, "I'm sorry if it felt like I never loved you. I'm unsure if I loved anyone in my life." Consumerism drove her life. Instead of the self-aggrandizing, eccentric attitude I usually saw from her, she said that while drunk. That was one of the few times I heard her honest self, perhaps one of the only truly honest things anyone has ever said to me. Strangely enough, it helped my music. Story 53. An old coworker of mine once said to me, "I'm sorry your parents don't love you the way you need them to." It made me realize that it was not that my parents did not love me, but that the way they loved me was not what I needed to feel loved. He took his own life a few years ago, and I still think about this conversation almost every day. He will never know how much of an impact he had on me. Story 54. My much older half-sister. Life only happens once. You make mistakes, but it's not like you get to take notes for the next go-around, just the future. Story 55. It was not an accident, but my therapist asked why I was looking to my mother for something I knew she would never be able to give me. Story 56. I am under no obligation to make sense to you. Okay, listen. In my real-life adventures, I'm a silly little guy who seeks whimsy. I am strange and unusual, and I'm having fun. I'm not hurting anyone. I dislike pranks, but I'm a weird little gremlin and I'm perfectly okay with that. People constantly try to shame me, to dull my sparkle, if you will. I don't care. This sentence lets me be without allowing for their judgment. Story 57. You can be in pain lying in bed all day, or you can be in pain leading a happy, productive life. It is always going to hurt, but you can choose how to live with your pain. This was said to me by my psychologist during acceptance and commitment therapy. I had been diagnosed with a truly painful and debilitating chronic health condition at 17 years old, and my mental health spiraled over the following few years. I was at university, able to keep up academically but struggling socially and physically, constantly staying in my apartment to catch up on sleep and missing out on the fun parts. My therapist helped me realize that, as a baseline, much of my body will hurt indefinitely. That does not mean I should not live a great life, get out, and do what I want to accomplish. Since then, I have been able to do a number of things I thought were impossible. Walk more than 10 kilometers unaided, climb hills, work full-time, get married, go to the gym, and now my husband and I are trying for a baby. I can choose to live with my pain. Story 58. Someone said I did not have to say anything after I had to put my dogs to sleep. Story 59. The best gift you can give to the people you love is to find a way to be happy yourself. Story 60. Just be yourself. I was talking to a coworker about a woman I like. Being shy and still affected by a past breakup, I was unsure how to approach or break the ice during those scary first real moments. My coworker said, "Be awkward and honest." That changed my perspective on more than just that situation. It was quite refreshing. Story 61. Regarding imposter syndrome, where is the evidence? That was such a mind shift for me. I keep it on a post-it note on my laptop for when I start to feel that imposter creeping in. Story 62. A little mantra my therapist wrote when I said I felt shame and guilt over making mistakes or hurting my partner's feelings. I am human. I am like everybody else. I can learn from this. It helps me daily. I carry guilt over many small things. Story 63. It was a simple sentence at the right time. She said, "You're a good guy. You deserve better. Treat yourself that way." In that moment, for whatever reason, my life changed for the better. Story 64. There are people who will miss you if you die by suicide. Those words stopped me from wanting to do it. 25 years later, I don't have that person in my life anymore, but the wise words remain. Story 65. Such is life. It may seem silly, but it stuck with me. Steve Irwin said it after he broke a rib wrestling a crocodile. He jumped up, holding his side, and said, "I think I broke my rib, but such is life." He just got right back in there. He had a tenacity for life that I will always strive for. I am lucky to be alive. I remind myself daily. Story 66. One day my therapist told me, while I was talking about something unrelated, that I have a very cruel internal critic. I responded, "Yeah, she's such a bitch." He replied, "You also use humor to mask pain." I think about that bitch a lot. My internal critic, not my therapist. I tend to joke when I feel I am being examined in a deep way. Layers of protection I didn't realize I had. If those strategies do not work, I withdraw. I have a lot of work to do. Story 67. Someone said to me, "It seems to me that you make a lot of excuses." It was said so earnestly that it made me rethink my behavior. It was a strange experience, but it helped me a lot. Story 68. Worry is like a rocking chair. It might give you something to do, but it is not taking you anywhere. You can apply this to most negative feelings, and I find it makes me stop and think about the power I am giving something that is not useful. Story 69. You're grieving the relationship you wish you had. This came up with my therapist. I understood that no matter what I do, I will never have the mother-daughter relationship I wanted. So that fantasy died and I was able to grieve. My mom is alive and we get along, but it is not a typical relationship. Story 70. I know the reason your father favored you. You were like the son he never had. My dad always wanted a boy, but he had all daughters. Even his stepchildren were girls. I was a tomboy. When my dad made all his kids go to the recreation center and sign up for classes, my sisters chose dance. I chose mixed martial arts. I had a letter I wrote to Santa published in the Stars and Stripes when I was in grade school because I told Santa to save the dolls for my sisters and bring me a train set and Matchbox cars. My aunt said this to me after my father's memorial service almost 7 years ago. It helped me connect to memories of my father that I had forgotten. It helped me realize the reasons I was always daddy's girl and helped me through some really difficult things that came in the following months. I had forgotten who I really was over the years, and this helped bring me back to myself. I have since returned to martial arts training, and it is amazing. I found my confidence again, and through mixed martial arts, I am teaching my daughter how to find hers too. Training has helped me emotionally and mentally more than it has physically. My father and I bonded over a common interest in martial arts. This is who I am, and I am only now realizing as I write this that I do like myself. Seriously, I am really cool. I was joking. Story 71. The only thing you get from looking back is a sore neck. Story 72. I lost my mother when I was 16. Many years later, I met a woman who looked like her, and I mentioned it. She gave me a big hug and said it was from my mother. I could not believe the flood of emotions that followed. Story 73. Mine is pretty simple, but after digging into my self-worth issue, my therapist said, "So what? You're allowed to have fun." That has always stuck with me. Story 74. Not yet. You haven't failed. You're just not there yet. As an all-or-nothing perfectionist, I usually crash into a pile of anxiety and criticism whenever I get something wrong or cannot stick to a plan. This perspective helped me reframe my perception of my failures. It is okay not to be perfect on the first try. I will get there, just not yet. Story 75. My ex, whom I originally thought I would spend the rest of my life with, said this to me when I told her, "I'm sorry if I ever pushed you to do something that made you uncomfortable. You never did. You were an amazing person. Whoever ends up with you will be the luckiest to have such a caring, loving man like you. I'm sorry I couldn't be that person." This both broke me and helped me through it. I still miss her, though. Story 76. You did the best you could with what you had at the time. It was like something clicked in my brain. Story 77. My professor in my psychology of personal adjustment class a long time ago said, "The person who just cut you off on the highway might be rushing his pregnant wife to the hospital." That quote often comes to mind and has saved me countless headaches over decades of driving and dealing with people. I still curse them out, but now it is for fun. Story 78. A former neighbor and friend once told me they only had 2 rules for their teenage son. Don't do anything illegal, and don't steal someone else's joy. And damn if those boys weren't the nicest, most thoughtful kids I ever met. I use the joy rule whenever I interact with others. Also, hurt people hurt people. It doesn't excuse anything but can help explain behavior, including your own. Story 79. You cannot pour from an empty cup. I learned that I am of no use to my family if I do not take care of myself first. Story 80. Grief is a form of love. I lost my mom last year, and stumbling across those words a couple of weeks later during a miserable late-night Reddit doomscroll helped me immensely. It might sound obvious, but it reframed my grief by putting it in a more positive light and showed me that it was an outpouring of how much I loved her as much as how much I missed her. It did not heal me completely. I still miss her terribly, but it helped me become much more accepting of my grief. On the hard days, it was a comfort to realize the pain came from a place that was anything but dark, and it anchored me by showing that grief is simply another way of loving her. Story 81. I am a stay-at-home mom with 3-year-old autistic twins and an autistic 10-year-old. I have been going through it lately and have been on the verge of a mental breakdown for a month. This past week, my husband took an extra day off work so we could have a 4-day weekend. He encouraged me to get out of the house every day for some me time. I spent all weekend reading a new book series at the beach, having meals in an actual restaurant without being rushed or my food going cold before I could eat it, catching up on my crochet projects, and just relaxing. This past Monday, he told me that he does not know how I do it all with the kids. He said his fuse was shorter and he was going crazy after only 3 days. He actually praised me for all I do and what I put up with, on top of maintaining a clean home and making sure he has a hot meal waiting for him after work. I almost cried. Lately, I have been feeling like any efforts and sacrifices I have made career-wise have gone unnoticed and unappreciated. Those few sentences healed a tiny piece of my soul. I laughed out loud. He is not one to show empathy, so that was a big deal for him. Story 82. You are not being selfish for choosing to walk away from something that hurts you. You are choosing yourself. There will always be people who are better than you at something, but that does not diminish the merit of your achievements. Story 83. My older sister, when I first started dating, said, "People will treat you as badly as you let them." Story 84. You can stop explaining why you're quiet. People who care will already understand. Story 85. Do not wait to be happy. This has been my mantra for a number of years now. Story 86. When I left my job a few years ago, a coworker said something like, Good luck at your new place. I hope you make some new friends. Knowing you, it won't take long. That was the nicest thing anyone had ever said to me. I had started that job fresh out of high school and worked there for several years. It was the peak of my social anxiety and depression. I was very lonely and had no friends from school. My coworkers were my only social contact, and that comment felt like a wave of reassurance that I was likable and that my anxieties were unfounded. Story 87. Ah, this thread is like someone cast an area of effect healing spell. Story 88. My husband yelled at me, "You take every criticism as though it's an attack on your worth as a human." I stopped short and said, "You know, you're absolutely right, but you could have been more gentle with how you said it. Part of the miracle is that I heard it at all. The rest of the miracle is that I stopped doing that." Absolutely life-changing. Story 89. I once said I was going to take my life while I was struggling with my health, and someone close to me told me, "You are stronger than that." I still think about that even though I am doing better now. Story 90. A teacher I had in first grade told me, while I was working, that she never understood why the other kids were so cruel to me. It made me realize I was not crazy. It was ableism, by the way. Turns out I am autistic, laughing out loud. Story 91. If someone does not think you are enough, there is nothing you can add that will change their mind. Story 92. When I was stressed about studying, my mom told me, "You're learning something that someone has already created, so it must be possible and easier." That really calmed me. Story 93. The only thing you have control over is yourself. Let them leave, you will still be standing because you can. Story 94. It is okay to disappoint another person in order to honor yourself. Story 95. Patient. If I could just save one person in this lifetime, I think that would be enough. Therapist. It's okay if that person is you. Story 96. You do not have an obligation to be good at your hobbies. You are allowed to just enjoy doing them. What is wrong with drawing stick figures or making imperfect music? Story 97. I once read in a fan fiction, "Don't blame yourself for something that was done to you." That felt like a bandage on my soul. Story 98. You haven't met everyone who is going to love you yet. I was going through a real rough patch toward the end of a relationship and feeling worthless. It really calmed me. Story 99. We become the person we needed when we were younger. I now work in mental health and advocate for people with chronic illnesses. This was said to me when I was discussing my passion for both areas. Story 100. Tell your brain and negative thoughts to go fuck itself. Every time I start getting anxiety, I say it. It works for me. Story 101. How are you so nice to me when you barely know me? In 2018, I dated a man for 4 years who destroyed my self-esteem and broke me down completely. He made me believe I was the scum of the earth and an awful person who manipulates everyone around me. This year, a friend and coworker went through a hardship and I supported him. When he asked how I could be so kind to someone I barely knew, it made me realize this is who I am. A kind, caring person who helps others, even strangers, because I can and because I would want someone to do the same for me. Story 102. A transgender store clerk once asked how to pronounce my rather difficult foreign name, so I told them. They repeated it casually yet with dedication and firmness, without stuttering, which made me feel that my name was no different from other people's names. I felt at home knowing at least one person saw my name as just a name. Story 103. My boss was quoting someone I cannot remember who said that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life believing it is stupid. It helped me put things into perspective and be less harsh on myself. Story 104. I struggled with my mental health significantly as an undergraduate, and my biology professor not only noticed but took time from his schedule to check in on me. He walked me to the student counseling center after class and gave me a great deal of support so I could pass his course. I pulled myself together and took an upper-level elective with him in my senior year. On graduation day, when my name was called, he stood up from his chair on stage, came to hug me after I received my diploma, and said, "I knew you could do it." I immediately cried. Story 105. You can't be wrong about your sexuality. This led me to think about what my sexuality and gender expression felt like for me, and how I had been putting all the emphasis on how others perceived me and what they wanted from me. Story 106. My therapist asked me during our last session when I would know that I had punished myself enough. Story 107. Do not take criticism from someone you would not take advice from. Story 108. I saw someone wearing a rubber bracelet that said, "Nothing changes if." I read it aloud. He slowly spun it and I read it again. "Nothing changes if." He kept spinning until it clicked. Nothing changes if nothing changes. That one sticks with me. Story 109. If I am in trouble or having a bad time, I know that just by talking to you everything is going to be okay. Story 110. I went back to see my child psychologist as an adult. I talked to her about what was really going on with the people who fostered me long-term. I can't remember exactly what she said, but it amounted to, that woman was absolutely nuts, and I felt like all I could do in my role was try to make sure you weren't cut off from access to therapy. I don't know whether she failed me by not advocating more or raising the alarm, but the moment of validation from someone who was there at the time, "Oh, that woman was actually a crazy person," was definitely freeing. Story 111. The only thing that comes to a dreamer is a dream, meaning anyone can fantasize about accomplishing something, but to get there you must put in the work. A street shoeshiner told me this when I said I wanted to go to medical school. After that, I buckled down and did the work to get there instead of simply saying, "This is what I want to do." Story 112. You need to show yourself some compassion. If you cannot control it, why is the outcome your fault? Story 113. When someone is drowning, that is not the time to teach them to swim. Story 114. In the context of anger management, you cannot control your emotions, but you can control your actions. Anger is a defensive response usually driven by fear. It produces the ferocity that primes you to ignore pain and fight to the death. It is an ancient survival emotion with little place in our relatively safe modern world. When our ancestors were ambushed by lions on the savannah, their only chance of survival was to go into berserker mode and fight for their lives. But your modern brain can work its way out of anger by looking inward and identifying the fear underlying it. Story 115. If everybody is different, what is normal? Mind you, it was said in 7th grade by another student and I still think about it. Story 116. My mom's excuse for disappearing from my life was that I did not call her. After 16 years, I realized I had not missed her. Story 117. Your father was an alcoholic and a good parent. Both can be true. Story 118. My therapist said something along the lines that not everyone is made to be social or to have a large social circle. I always thought something was wrong with me because I did not have any friends. But what he said made me realize he was right. I only wanted friends because I thought that was what I was supposed to do, but I realize I am not a social person. I am at my best when I am alone. I do not like commitments, and having friends often means meeting up, texting, and so on, and I am not good at that. I just want peace. My therapist helped me realize that this is okay, and I have now accepted myself as I am. I am extremely grateful for that. Story 119. I read that we should talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a friend. Do not be so hard on yourself. If a friend came to me and said she had made a mistake and felt like an idiot, I would tell her she is not an idiot, she is a good person, and everyone makes mistakes. When I make a mistake, I stop myself from saying, "Why am I so stupid? I always do this." And instead I show myself compassion. Story 120. A heart that is easily provoked often shuts down opportunities for growth. Story 121. My coworker, who used to comment regularly on my appearance, "Where are you going dressed like that? Why are you dressed like that?" told me I am a very beautiful woman. I had never seen myself that way. Not that I think poorly of myself, but I was shocked. I keep thinking, really me? Story 122. Not everything is a reflection of you. I can't remember the context, but when I'm struggling, that thought always helps calm me. He was abusive too, so go figure. Story 123. One of my friends told me you deserve peace, not proof. He was right. It will always tire you out. I felt it in my spine, laughing out loud. Story 124. Your comfort is important, said a man in bed when I asked whether he minded that we stop or take a break. Story 125. I always felt like I was never great at anything, but I liked trying new things. In my negativity, I would say I was a mile wide and an inch deep, or more often jack of all trades, master of none. One day someone sensed I was taking that as a way of knocking myself down and asked if I knew the rest of the saying. A jack of all trades, master of none is better than being a master of one. I found that incredibly liberating and have embraced that side of my personality. Story 126. It is not your fault. The way they treated you is a reflection of their character. Story 127. After I divorced, my son's father was lax about paying child support and about sending birthday or Christmas gifts. I complained to my uncle that my ex always did those things for his older son, my stepson, so why couldn't he do the same for our son? My uncle said, "Hold on. You picked out and mailed the gifts and cards. You managed the household bills and made sure child support was always there. He never did those things. That was 20 years ago, and I still remember it." Story 128. Just move the house. I mentioned to my wife that I had cleaned out part of our basement to set up a mini gym. Our children's playhouse was still in the area, and my wife said we just need to move the house. Alone. Move the house sounds like a huge endeavor. How could I move an entire structure by myself? But when you look at the problem, it is more manageable than you expect. I also get other meanings from it. Just move the house can mean do only the thing you are tasked with, or just get it over with. The best way to finish is to begin. I find myself saying just move the house to motivate me for small tasks all the time now, and it has made such a difference. Story 129. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. Breen Brown explained to my inner teenager why I never fit in during high school. I always wanted to belong and be my authentic self and let others be theirs. For the majority, that is not how high school works. Story 130. You're fine the way you are. It's been rough feeling like I'm not enough. I know I am, but I have to remind myself from time to time. Story 131. Everyone fucks up. The earlier you realize that, the better off you are. Story 132. My therapist asked me what I was punishing myself for. It made me realize I had been linking things to being adopted. Story 133. Would you speak to others the way you speak to yourself in your head? That question stopped me in my tracks. No, absolutely not. So stop speaking to yourself that way. I am still a work in progress and possibly always will be. But now when I hear the harsh voice in my head, I make a conscious effort to stop and think about what I would say to someone else in the same situation. Be kinder to yourself. Self-worth and self-acceptance start with this. Story 134. She cheated on me. 2 years later, she was about to marry him. We were together for 4 years. I was dreaming about her every night. One night, I woke up bawling from a dream in which I saw her at an airport. I fell to my knees in front of her and begged her to tell me that I had ever meant anything. I begged her to see how much her cheating had hurt me. I told my best friend about it and explained my relationship with her before the breakup. He told me that I did not miss her. I missed the friend I had lost when we broke up. Flipped a switch. I never dreamed about her again and I never looked back. Story 135. Marriage should be a sea of happiness, with only occasional islands of unhappiness, not the other way around. Story 136. You're really easy to love name, said a close friend of mine. After a lifetime of emotional neglect and abuse from a dysfunctional family, I never believed it. Story 137. I was watching the Great British Bake Off, and one of the contestants said to try your best. Everyone's best is different. You do not have to be the best, but you must try your best. Story 138. Fundamentally, children do not need grandparents. They need parents who provide a safe, loving environment. My psychiatrist helped me when I was struggling with the guilt of estrangement. Turned my whole brain inside out. It has been over 7 years now, and I am happier, healthier, and more at peace with it. Story 139. Me. It's going to be a good day. All cheery and obviously trying to pep myself up. Coworker. Sometimes a decent day is more achievable, and it's okay to hope for one. Story 140. Sometimes the most important change or improvement is the one you do not see right away. A gym friend was kind about my slow progress with weightlifting, and that helped me become less results-oriented. Story 141. You are pretty. I actually thought I was ugly because growing up my sisters called me ugly and dumb, which kind of damaged my self-esteem. Laughing out loud. In high school and university, a lot of people called me pretty. Story 142. When I was getting frustrated about not knowing how to do something perfectly the first time in my first year of teaching, my head of faculty took me aside and said, "We're going to talk about the word yet." He explained that yet gives you permission to be bad at something because it means you will learn and be able to do it with practice. It has been 13 years and I still think of that when I get frustrated at myself for not mastering something the first time I try it. I used the word with my students when they said they could not write an essay. We practiced breaking the task down even to the sentence level when necessary. Usually that was enough for them to realize it is okay to have to practice and to get a small mental reset before we divided the task into parts they knew they could do and built up from there. One student went from barely writing a sentence in year 7 to bringing me a whole essay from another subject to proofread in year 9. He was so proud to have written it all himself. He even highlighted specific parts he wanted to ask about. I nearly burst with pride that day and, with his permission, I rang his mother to tell her how far he had come. I swear he grew 6 inches when I told him I wanted to call his mother. But seriously, this student and I spent hours getting him from, "I can't do this," to, "I can't do this yet," to, "I did it." He deserved all the praise for how hard he worked, especially in a subject he found difficult. Story 143. My then 6-year-old daughter asked about my childhood. It was not a happy time, and I told her a story without saying it was about my parents. After I stopped, she looked at me for a while and then said, "Wow, I hate the people who did that to you." It was so validating that someone, even a child who was not present during that memory, agreed it was wrong. I often have a hard time understanding how I feel about my childhood and I dismiss my feelings. I had to bite back tears. Story 144. "Ah, you're such a Catholic," a philosopher friend said, referring to my tendency to martyr myself in bad relationships. Story 145. I ended my longest period without self-harm and was beating myself up, calling myself a failure and not knowing what to do. My best friend at the time simply said, "Then you start over again." I have been clean for 7 years. Story 146. I was caring for a man with advanced dementia. One day, while I sat in a chair feeling deflated about the end of a long-term relationship and uncertain about my future, he said, "Just because this door has closed, it doesn't mean you won't find another door worth opening. Everything will be okay." Story 147. I think I'm going through an identity crisis. I hope all my friends keep going through identity crises until they find the one that fits them best. Story 148. A phrase I read in the book, The 53 Buddha Sutras, healed me. Reading all the sutras is like healing your humanity and brings immense peace when you finish. It is better to defeat oneself than to win 1,000 battles, because only then will victory be yours. Neither angels nor demons, neither heaven nor hell can take it away from you. Overcoming yourself is the victory that no one else can take away. Story 149. My dad died in March 2021. Coronavirus disease 2019 was still raging and many things were being done virtually. I received this in an email from my colleague Emily. If your dad is anything like you, then I know he was a good man and will be much missed. May you have all you need for your sad heart in the next while. Virtual hug. Story 150. Sometimes you just have to jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. Story 151. I made the mistake of inviting my brother to my wedding. At one point we were away from everyone and he started yelling profanities at me. My husband, who had tried to respect my request to let me handle it, came over and shouted at him that he could not talk to me like that. That moment made me realize that my family had long allowed my brother to treat me horribly, which is why I never thought to cut him off. Everyone always told me that is just how he is, even though he was only ever terrible to me. I accepted so much from him and expected so little from my family that I had no idea what I had internalized. I have not talked to most of them since then. Story 152. My husband, who was a pastor at the time, told me that it is okay to question God. He said God can handle it and understands what it is like to be human and not understand what is happening. He was the first person to tell me that, which helped me feel much safer and more autonomous. It eventually led me to deconstruct my faith completely and develop a much better relationship with God, the universe, the source, or whatever you call it. He changed my life with those words. Story 153. After a friend died, I wrote a Facebook post expressing regret that we had drifted apart after high school. We stayed in sporadic contact but could not meet in person. A former teacher commented, "Please remember you did the best you knew at the time." Story 154. I've never had a leadership opportunity one didn't ask for. I was 14 and I had a 19-year-old mentor. This was more than 15 years ago. It was a throwaway line he said in passing. I was a shy, embarrassed introvert who never wanted to be noticed. That sentence propelled my career. Asking and volunteering to lead changed my life. I have had a number of promotions starting early in my career, and by about 30 I was further along than most of my peers. It involved seeing big tasks, volunteering to take them, asking to lead them, and then asking for promotions. I wrote 3 of my own job descriptions to advance. That little sentence rings in my ear whenever I see opportunities, and I am very grateful for it. It gave me courage and confidence. Of course, asking is only half of it. Following through is what clinches it. I would never be where I am if I had waited on the sidelines until someone put me in the game. Story 155. 2024 was an absolute disaster for me. It started in January with a burst water pipe and ended in December with my house in foreclosure. While I was venting to a friend about ways to save my house, he said, "It's just a house." That helped me realize how miserable I had become in a place I had lived in for almost 15 years. I decided to sell my house. I received more than enough to pull it out of foreclosure and bought a truck and camper with the remainder. I am now 15 hours away and heading south to Maryland. Life is a river. If you swim against the current, you will grow exhausted and eventually drown. Or you can go with the flow. You never know where it might take you. I chose to go with the flow and have not looked back since. Story 156. He told me if something or someone makes me feel bad, why would I want it or say yes to it? It is a no for me for the sake of my happiness. I was 26 and I had never understood the power of no until that moment. Now I repeat this to myself and others on a regular basis. Story 157. Feelings do not have to be an emergency. I was so used to any negative emotion meaning I had to act on it immediately. Panic, fix it, make it go away. I did a lot of damage doing that. I thought emotions equaled danger. My body still thinks that quite a lot of the time, but I don't have to react as though they are. I don't even have to make them go away every time. It is okay to feel them, acknowledge them, and just not try to solve them. Let them run, then move on. Story 158. You don't have to put yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. That made me realize I should take better care of myself instead of worrying about others. Story 159. I was at the height of my depression and I did not even realize how far I had gone. I was ready to take my wife somewhere and sat zoned out in the driver's seat with the engine on. I heard the rear car door open and, as my wife was about to get in, I zoned out and started driving off with the door still open and her not even in the car. I did not drive far, only about a meter, but instead of getting angry, my wife asked if I was all right and suggested I see a doctor if I was not feeling well. I called the doctor the same day, and he started me on antidepressants. That began my journey of recovery. This is not exactly an answer to the original poster's question, but I wanted to share in case it helps someone going through depression. Story 160. Oh, so handsome. Hearing that finally broke me out of my own head and made me see what was actually in front of me. It may not have lasted forever, but that one sentence shaped who I've become. Thank you, Irene. I will always be grateful for your love, your kindness, and most importantly, your friendship. Story 161. I was down in the dumps after a horrible breakup. My older coworker, in his late 60s to early 70s and fatherly, casually asked me how my boyfriend was, and I told him we had split up. I must have looked morose. "You'll be fine," he assured me with a big smile. Men are like buses. If you miss one, another will be along in 5 minutes. The advice was so simple and delivered in such a light-hearted way that I immediately saw the wisdom in it. Most people react with sympathy when they hear a relationship has ended, but he had lived enough life to know that one man was not worth being so upset over. I knew then that I would be okay. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.